Hi all, my name is Rosalind Hayes and I'm a voice, piano, and guitar teacher in the Chester County area of Pennsylvania. And today I'm going to be talking to you about how not to sing with a nasal voice, how to deal with that nasal voice. So there are a couple things going on here when you have a nasal voice. It actually isn't so much to do with you singing into your nose as it is to do with the amount of space in your throat. The vocal cords need room to expand in the throat, especially as we move up to hit higher pitches. They're going to stretch out and get thinner, like strings on the piano. The thinner strings are the ones that, and if you look inside the piano, those thinner strings are the ones that play the higher pitches. So one of the things that you're going to want to do, well, first you want to check, do I have a nasal voice? Do I have a nasal placement? And there's a really easy test for how to check. All you're going to do is sustain an ah vowel, ah, and if you can take your fingers and close your nose and the tone of that sound does not change, then you know you're fine. So for example, ah, doesn't change whether or not I close my nose because none of the sound is actually escaping out of my nose, so my nose isn't really involved in the process of producing the sound. However, if I am singing an ah vowel and I close my nose and I have trouble getting that sound out, or I feel like the sound gets stuck in my nose, or I hear that sound is nasal, then I know that I have a problem with my vowel placement and the space in my throat. So for example, again, again, it's going to get really difficult to send that sound out, and it's going to get super nasally when I close my nose. It's going to become very obvious. So that's one way that you can check. So you can do that ah vowel test to check. Now, how are you going to fix this? Well, like I said, some of it is due to the space in your throat. So one of the things that you probably want to get into the habit of doing when you're breathing is to create that space every single time you go to take a breath before producing some sound. So for example, you would breathe in and yawn. And when we yawn, we are actually going to create the space needed to produce the vowel. For example, take a breath. That allows my vocal cords to expand and have the space to move that they need to produce the notes without becoming nasal. What's happening when my sound is actually going nasal is there's not enough space in my throat, so all this extra sound is escaping into my nose. And so I'm getting a nasal sound. Because I'm not using the space in my throat and my mouth to produce the sound, I'm using space in my nose because there's nowhere for that sound to go. So the other thing that you've got to think about, you probably know one of the reasons that we have ENTs, ear, nose, and throat doctors, is because all of those areas of our body are connected, with tubing and stuff inside, internally. So your nose, the back of your nose actually is connected to your throat. You probably know that if you have a cold at some point. So one of the things that we have to do as singers is to close something called the nasal port, which is the entrance at the back, or the exit, I guess, at the back of the nose into the throat. And how you do that is through that yawn again. Basically what's going to come up, there's a muscle behind your uvula. The uvula is that thing that hangs down, and in cartoons sometimes when they're screaming you can see it like kind of waggling around. That thing that hangs down in the back of your throat, behind that is something called your soft palate, and that's a muscle that you want to lift and close then the nasal port because it's going to block it and stop the sound from escaping. So we yawn and open it up, and then we're creating space in the throat, and we're closing the nasal port so none of that sound escapes. So basically it's due to space. The other thing that can really help is vowel placement, and I kind of spoke about vowels and diction in the last video, but one of the things that you want to think is to have a really open ah vowel, one that's free and it can move. So I think the easiest way that I've had, the easiest time that I've had explaining this to students who have struggled with this particular issue is to have them think ah as in hot, almost, rather than ah as in honk. Because the nasal ah almost has that N influence in it, and N is a very nasal consonant. So, for example, That one I was using thinking ah as in hot, okay? This one I'm gonna think ah as in honk. You can hear how the end sound is influencing my vowel, and we really want to keep the vowels apart from any consonants. So really, there's 3 things you've got to remember. Open up the space in the throat using a yawn. If you're really struggling with nasality, I would suggest that you do it every single time you take a breath until you get comfortable with keeping that space open in the throat all the time. The other thing, close the nasal port. That kind of goes hand in hand with that space. And finally, think about your vowel placement and what vowel you're using. We want an open vowel, ha, rather than ha, like honk. And some of that's to do with creating space in your mouth, but if you think about those 2 words, hot and honk, you usually get it. All right, so as usual, you can visit any one of my links below to learn more. Visit RosalindHayesSoprano.com and learn how you can even take lessons online. All right, thanks, bye.